It's been almost 6 years ago that I resigned to retire from my pastorate in Florida, and to try to help the search committee for my replacement, I made a video on how to call a pastor and what to look for in a pastor. Since that time, several people have asked me, and I'm thankful that they did, what else would I add to that if I was looking for a music minister? And so I'm going to take approximately 15 minutes to try to tell you some of the critical things that I would look for if I was looking for a music minister for my church. The first thing, of course, and the foremost thing of all, is that that man would have to love God and love people. Let me say that again. The mandatory requirement would be that he love God and love people. Without that, there's no hope for him being successful in his position. Now, from an educational standpoint, I would look for someone, particularly if I was going to dual use the minister of music, worship leader, whatever name you happen to tag to your position. I would look for someone who had a degree from either a Bible college or from a seminary, where he had studied the scriptures and shown that he had felt a calling on his life to draw close to God, not just to make music. However, I would also say that a strong musical training would be the most advantageous, because you can't lead other members to read music, to understand music, to play music, unless in fact you know yourself how to do that. So certainly from a physical training standpoint, not just a seminary degree or Bible degree, but actual music training. I would also look for a man that was ordained or licensed, because that would mean that some other church or entity had taken a hard look at this man's lifestyle and his desires and his calling, and had put a stamp of approval on him. Certainly I would talk to that church or institution that had ordained or licensed that particular minister. From an experience standpoint, obviously, we'd like to have somebody with 35 years experience who's 25 years old, and we all know that that's not going to happen. We also know that if a man has been tremendously successful in a mega church, he's not going to step back and want to do music in a church of 100 or 200 or 300. And so what I would look for is a man that had 3 to 5 years, whether it was bivocational or volunteer work, in the local church, to show that he understood the local church and that he understood how they operate. I would get as many references as I possibly could, but I would not get them from the candidate. Let me say that again. I would get as many references as I possibly could, but not from the candidate. Any references that I were to give you for myself, or if you were to ask somebody else for references, are going to be ones that are going to brag on me and are going to say good things about me. That's not just what you want to hear always. You'd like to hear what everybody thinks. And so as many of the past churches that he served try to get into the organization and get permission from the pastor of his previous churches to talk to choir members, instrumentalists, sound people, members of the church who listen to his music from a congregational standpoint, deacons, fellow staff members, and find out all you can about this man. Soon he's coming into your church, and when he comes in, he's going to have moved his family, likely from a good distance. So you're not only affecting your church by bringing this man in, but you're also affecting his family. Nothing is worse than for this not to be a good marriage of church and staff member, for it is difficult for everyone. There's a hurt within the church, as some will build allegiances, and there's a hurt to the man and his family if he has to move on to another location. So be careful. Don't act too quickly. Be sure. And that gets back to the experience and the references. We want to be sure what they have to say, not only about his musical abilities, but you also want to know about his people skills and his ability to do the job that you're calling him for. Now, it's very, very important that you ask everyone that you talk to his strengths and weaknesses. If somebody says he has no weaknesses, they probably don't know him, because we all have our weaknesses. So we want to be sure that we talk to all of the people we can, but not just those on his resume. And we want to talk to a couple of pastors that have worked with him, a couple of associational missionaries, a couple of deacons, and we want to be sure where he stands doctrinally. We want to be sure that he believes that he's Southern Baptist, because we follow the Scriptures as closely as any denomination does. And we want to be sure that he believes that sin is sin, and he's not wishy-washy about divorce not being desirable, or homosexuality not being a sin, or alcoholic beverages, or the Scriptures being inerrant. We want to be sure where he stands doctrinally, and be sure that that is a representation of your church, that he is absolutely going to fit into your church with its beliefs, and hopefully you're a conservative Southern Baptist church who believes in the inerrancy of Scripture, and who wants to be sure that every staff member believes exactly what we believe. The second thing is we want to know about his people skills. It's been my experience over the years in dealing with music ministers, both in other churches and in my own church, that many of the music ministers are artistic temperamented. That is, they're not as easy to get along with as a typical other staff member. They people skills may be lacking, and so you want to be careful, particularly with a really devoted music person, that in fact their skills don't override the fact that they don't have good people skills, because that can cause more trouble than good music can provide. So we want to be sure that they have a temperament that is good with people, and that they love people, and it's clear to everybody that that's what they believe. And that's a question you need to ask all of those references. How are his people skills? Did he ever have any disputes or problems with people? If so, how often? And dig into that area. Family. What about his family? Does he have the kind of authority in his home that he should? Is he a good father, a good husband? Does he have a reputation of having been a good father and a good husband? Has he been through divorce? What are the circumstances of his family situation, and particularly in the area of his wife? You're not hiring his wife unless you do that by written agreement and actually have a job description for her. Too many times I've seen wives from behind the scenes try to run the show, tell their husbands what to do. That does not work. And especially if her music taste is different than the congregation that he's been called to. So be careful that you understand the relationship that his wife is going to have in his ministry. Be sure you understand you're not hiring his wife. Don't expect more from her than you would from any other church member. You didn't hire her, you hired her husband. And so be sure you understand what relationship he has with his wife as it refers to his music ministry. We also want to be sure that we understand his work ethics. It's very, very important that a man not be slothful and lazy. It's also important that he's not a workaholic where he sacrifices his family and expects everybody in the music ministry to sacrifice their family. A good music minister will find the balance between family and church, and certainly making God more important in his life than either of those things, where God is number one in his life, his family is number two, and his church is number three, but not as an excuse to not put in the hours that he needs to put in to earn his wages and to lead the church properly, or to be an example for others in the church. So check in his work ethics. These are some of the questions you need to be asking these other references about him, and whether or not they could find him in the office during weekdays, or whether they could find him at hospitals or visiting or doing any other duties that were assigned by the church, and not just coming on Sunday and Wednesday to lead the worship services and then just sit quietly in his office and listen to music without doing anything else constructive to the ministry of the church. So be sure that you understand his work ethics. Be sure about his flexibility. He will have a certain style of music that he prefers. If that doesn't match up with the style of music that your church wants, that's going to be a problem. And so be sure that you, if you're hiring somebody that doesn't already play and sing the kind of music that your church is accustomed to and that wants to continue with, be sure that he's flexible enough to do both and to bring about a blended worship style that everybody will be happy. Now that's really hard to keep everybody happy, understand, but at least that he'll try and not just say, I'm going to sing only choruses, I'm going to only sing contemporary, I'm going to only sing traditional hymns. And make sure that he's flexible enough to try to meet as many of the needs of the church in the area of style of music and type of music. Be sure that you understand how flexible he is in taking on additional responsibilities as staff members may become sick, as pastors may have times when they need a special assistance, and be sure that he gets along well with staff. Be sure to ask staff. Now, let me warn you that if he's currently serving somewhere, you want to be sure that you don't put him at jeopardy by letting it be known to that church that you're looking at taking him away from them. It's very, very important that you have his approval to make contact with anyone in his current church. And it's important then to check the community that he's serving in to see what kind of reputation he has if you can't talk directly with that church, to be sure that he's not looking for a new position because he's being forced out of his current position. Be very careful to not put him in jeopardy. Remember again, you're affecting the life of the church and you're affecting the life of he and his family. So be very, very careful with current church service. Salary. Make sure that his salary fits into the salary ranges that you have for your other staff members. If you bring him in substantially lower than everybody else, every time that he looks at other people and recognizes what salaries are in the budget, he's going to be resentful. If his salary is way above everybody else's, all of the rest of the staff are going to be resentful. His salary ought to represent his experience, his education, and his track record, but it has to fit in with the structure of your salaries within your church. Otherwise, you're going to bring about bad feelings within the church. And then finally, I would say to you, make sure that this man that you're looking at loves the Lord and loves others, because that's what the Bible tells us that is the major criteria for all of us, but particularly ministers. Love the Lord and love other people. That's been my thought. If you have other questions, feel free to call me. My area code is 813-220-7894. That's my cell phone number. And I may have you call me back on a landline. I may be in South Carolina or North Carolina at one of our two places, but you can always reach me on my cell phone at 813-220-7894, and I'll be glad to answer any other specific questions that you might have. I hope that this has been helpful in your search for a music minister or worship leader or whatever you happen to call him at your church, and I hope that you'll follow the guidelines that I've given you if you want to have a successful marriage in bringing in a music minister that fits into your staff and that leads your church in true worship. Performance should not be everything for this man. His purpose should be to glorify the Lord. And that doesn't always mean having the best singing voices or the best ensembles or the best praise chorus team, but it does mean everybody in a spirit of worship calling out to the Lord with a worshipful heart. God bless you and have a wonderful day.